Okay. All right. So welcome everyone to the Team and Group Coaching COP's July learning session. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel Goja, and I'm the lead for the Team and Group Coaching COP, as well as your host for today evening. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping things that I'd like to get out of the way. This session offers you 1.5 ICF CCEUs, but to avail those, you will need to be present for the complete session. Secondly, please ensure that your display name is the same as you would like to show up on your CCEU certificate. So if there's something you want to change there, turn something into capital, move your first name, last name, anything, just do that and make sure that it's in the format you want on your CCEU certificate. All right, so with that, I am very excited to welcome this month's guest, the wonderful and amazing Jennifer Britton. Jennifer is the founder and CEO and lead coach of a company, Potentials Realized. And she is one of the pioneers in the space of group and team coaching. She has influenced a generation of coaches, including myself, through her writing, speaking, and training around group and team coaching. Since 2006, she has been training coaches in group and team coaching through her ICF CCE approved programs, initially starting with Group Coaching Essentials and Team Coaching Essentials, and now expanding into a 10-course pathway that supports coaches towards the new ICF ACTC credential. Jennifer wrote the first book on group coaching titled Effective Group Coaching in 2009. In fact, the first time I had to design a group coaching program, I literally built my entire program chapter by chapter using that book. And over the years, it's also a book I've recommended to many coaches, including some of you in this room. Of course, that's not the only book that Jennifer has written. This year, she celebrates the 10th anniversary of the release of her second book, From One to Many, Best Practices for Team and Group Coaching. And more recently, her Reconnecting Workspaces book have become a go-to resource for leaders, teams, and organizations, learning to navigate the ongoing changes in the evolving workspace of virtual, remote, and hybrid work. Jennifer is very passionate about supporting coaches to do their best work in the complex space of team and group coaching. And her most recent TED Talk, Coaching Teams Through Chaos, has been viewed more than 30,000 times. And with that, I am honored to welcome and hand over to our very special guest for today, Jennifer Britton.
Thank you so much. And it's really a pleasure. I want to say good evening to all of you and warm wishes from about an hour and a half north of Toronto, Canada. So we just celebrated our Canada Day a few days ago, and it is the heart of summer. And so as I was sharing with Rachel, always a pleasure to get to connect with coaches who are passionate about this topic. As you've heard today, we're talking about group coaching. I know this is a COP for team and group coaching. And, right now, there is so much focus on team coaching with our new ACTC. Always happy to talk about team coaching. Definitely want to share like a lot of the topics that we're touching on today. You can follow up in any of the books that Rachel mentioned. Perhaps you have a copy on your bookshelf of one or many of my books. And I'm also on YouTube, right? I've been on YouTube for 13, 14 years now. So you can head on over. It's Effective Group Coach is my handle on YouTube. We now have hit a 300 video mark over the last 14 years. And so please dive in. There's a lot of content around group coaching. And as you've heard, it's something I'm very, very passionate about. So today I'm going to just start sharing my screen. We are recording, as you know. And today we're going to dive into this wonderful topic of group coaching. So I'm going to be doing some of the talking. We will probably do one breakout as we go because groups is all about peer. It's about peer relationship and dialogue. Now, given that I speak to coaches almost every week of the year, I know I often get the feedback, we loved breakout, but I wish Jennifer had had more time to talk. So I'm going to try and hit that balance of me presenting some ideas. I want to also bring in some voices. People like I know Rachel's doing a lot of group coaching. We've got Sridhar, who is an alumni of our programming. I'm hoping they can also share a little bit about what they're doing locally to really talk about how do we expand and scale our coaching conversation to groups. So we're going to look at 4 things today. We're going to dive into really group coaching, but I will lightly touch on team coaching to differentiate. And I do want to talk about how does group coaching differ from facilitation and workshops. If you had met me back in the year 2000, I was a facilitator. I'd been a facilitator, a process facilitator for more than a decade at that point. And I was a leader within the United Nations system. I managed programs and projects, very complex ones, post-disaster management. So the last few years have been very interesting for me. But I also was tapped by my bosses because I've had a passion all my life since I was very little and a teenager in helping groups and teams thrive. And so for many years, when I worked for the UN, my bosses would call me up and say, "Hey, Jennifer, we've got like a headquarters here. Can you come over and facilitate a workshop?" I would leave those workshops just feeling jazzed as the teams and the departments and the groups were. But time and time again, I found that as I reached back a month later, 3 months later, and said, "Hey, how's it going with those plans?" Time and time again, it was the same response. "Oh, yeah, like disasters have happened, conflict has happened. We've had to just leave our plans and our goals on the sideline." And, that's not enough in an ever changing world. We really, really need to be having that space for accountability and a space to even remind us of what's important. And to me, that's what group and team coaching is. It's a space to bring people together to, collaborate and really look at creating the results and relationships that are important to them. In my latest writing, Reconnecting Workspaces series, which is actually a series of a number of books, I really dive deeply into this notion of, coaching and the work that we do, whether we're coaches or leaders or team or group members, is really about building that space for relationships and results. Now, workshops and facilitation are wonderful, but they're often this one-off. And the one-off is usually not enough to help us keep the focus. So we're going to dive a little bit into defining what group coaching is. I'll contrast that very quickly with team coaching. I also want to stimulate some conversation around why group coaching is an important vehicle for four things: connection, change, culture, and capacity building. And as I think about where we are right now in the middle of 2023, these are four elements that are so important. So as you sit down and meet with your client organizations, leaders, team members, these may be areas that you're hearing from them, and they can be a great en route or on ramp into the group coaching conversation or program. Now, a presentation that I do would not be mine if I didn't talk about some of the best practices for designing and leading group coaching conversations. And as you heard from Rachel, this year, actually this month, later this month, we start celebrating 10 years of the release of From One to Many, Best Practices for Group and Team Coaching. And I'm always amazed. I get emails, I get pings, like in LinkedIn, is Rachel connected with me saying, "You know what, like I'm using your work. I'm really using this as a springboard." And so the best practices that I hope you're going to take forward out of today's presentation are things that you either may already be doing, or they may be things that you can do to amplify what you are doing. I think as our profession continues to evolve, and I'd love to hear from you. Maybe you could put in chat right now, are you coaching groups already? If you are, say, "Yes, I'm coaching groups." Let us know how many years you've been coaching groups, or if you're new to coaching groups, put that in as well. Because regardless of whether we're new as a group coach or seasoned, like myself and others in the room, we should always be learning. I like to say every day in my work as a practitioner, the day that I feel I know it all is the day I should actually hang up my coaching bag, right? It's certainly not something that we want to be, becoming too overconfident, because every hour with different and similar groups is a different conversation. And so that's led me to this fourth part of the component. We're going to mix this up as we go, but I do also want to get you thinking about what are the strengths that you uniquely bring to the group and or team coaching space. Our presence, our superpowers, our strengths are something that are really the anchor of what we bring. And our mastery is when we can use that anchor and amplify it to build out the tools, the practices, the approaches that we have at our disposal. Now, the growth of the group and team coach is not a 6-month journey. I would assert it's a multi-decade journey to really become a masterful group coach. And so in my own work, this last piece has really evolved. A year ago this summer, I launched the group and team coaching superpower quiz. It's now been taken by thousands of group and team coaches. And I'm going to share that with you today. And I hope you're going to grab your phone actually as we go and find out what your superpowers and strengths are as a group and a team coach, because it may be a little bit different than how you show up as a one-on-one coach. So let's go to chat. And just again, if you haven't had a moment to let us know if you're new, if you are, and when I say new to group coaching, maybe you are seasoned. If you're seasoned, how many years have you been coaching? We've got everything from like new to 7 years, 5 years, 8 years, etc. And thank you to you, Rachel, for putting in the YouTube link as well. My hope is always when I speak at presentations like this that you'll save the chat. And I'll ask Rachel to remind us at the end to save the chat, because we've got experts in the room, right? That's the beauty of group coaching. We are constantly harnessing the power of the collective. So while I am here as an expert, yes, this is my area of work, you too have expertise that I don't bring. And so we want to really be harnessing that as well. So we've got a lot of you just starting out, and that's great. I think for both, sort of the range of this group, you'll find that there's some really good value in terms of adding something. And I'd love for you to just share with us, like, what's important about group coaching right now for you? Why are you here today? Are you wanting some new ideas? Are you wanting, have you gotten a request from an organization? Share with us in chat again, what's important about group coaching right now for you? And that's going to help me really balance out where we spend our time today. Because as you can appreciate, group coaching, like team coaching, has grown from this thing where people felt like years ago you could just do one course on group coaching and have it all. And as we've seen here at Potentials Realize, we now offer a 10-course pathway towards 125 hours of learning around group and team coaching. So there's a lot of range here, and I'd love for you to just share with us what is the thing that is most important for you in being able to, take something out of this. So curious about this domain, to check if I'm doing things right. I'd like to understand and learn how it works. So to me, that also talks a little bit about like, how do we design this? What are some of the core elements? And that's going to be the best practices. For Sridhar, it's about ability to create greater impact. For Ramesh, bring about faster and more sustainable change for my clients. Nikhil, what coaching themes or topics lend themselves to group coaching? Great. We're going to give some case studies. Sailesh, seems cost-effective program for companies. Absolutely. Like to know about new competencies and certifications around group coaching. Learning more, creating great individually and as a group. Understand this dimension of coaching. My clients are asking for this, and add on to my tools. So thank you. This is really valuable because we could take this, as I said, in a range of areas. Now, what's beautiful is when we're coaching, we are coaching. We are always bringing it back to the ICF core coaching competencies. And for the last 14 years, I've been asserting that whether we're sitting down one-on-one with a group or a team, our work is always anchoring back to what the ICF found in 2009 as the core of coaching. What's interesting is even in the last few years, with the evolution of the new revised competency base, moving from 11 to 8 competencies, as well as the evolution of the team coaching competencies, with which I was very heavily involved for several years, we are still seeing that the heart of coaching, any type of coaching conversation, is always about goals and what the client wants, right? We are really looking in a group coaching context at helping people grow individually, as someone said, while learning collectively. And that's a little bit different than team coaching, right? Team coaching, we're working with a set, an entity, a collection of people in teams who are together for a shared purpose and a common mission. And in team coaching, we're really looking for alignment. In group coaching, it's different. It's like this group, right? We're all coming because we have an interest. We have a shared interest in learning more about group coaching. We could also be a group of new leaders and we want to be a better leader. But the big difference with group coaching is that we're still building many times individual capacity first. I want to be a better leader, or I want to be a better coach. And I'm going to do that by having the space held for individual reflection as well as collective learning. And so that is just a very quick definition of group coaching. You can read, more descriptive ones. I always say it's evolving the core coaching competencies to a small group setting. And one thing to note with group coaching is that we know that it's about small, intimate experiences. In fact, when I embarked on writing effective group coaching back in 2008, I was curious, like, what is the best group size? We didn't know, like, should you be coaching with 15 people, 50 people, 2 people, 5 people? And what we found is that there's a sweet spot, and the sweet spot has still held true in 2023. Virtually, that 4 to 8 range, 4 to 8 group members really is a sweet spot, whether we are virtual or even in person. Now, depending on your skills, depending on your experience, you may grow your groups larger than that 4 to 8 range, but there is a limit for many groups in terms of having the trust, safety, and accountability that's necessary for a coaching conversation. Because remember, in coaching, we're not just having a conversation, we're having a conversation about the things that are most important to us. Again, going back to our goals. And a big part of coaching is about diving below the waterline into not only the realm of taking action, but I would assert coaching really lives in the space of deepening awareness. So as you see here on the slide with the fingerprint, right, a lot of our work as coaches, individually, group, and team, is about helping those entities or individuals understand who they are. What are their beliefs? What are their mindsets? What are their perspectives? What are their assumptions, etc.? And that's the heart of coaching, which as a facilitator, we may touch on it lightly, and I still facilitate, right? I've been a process facilitator for more than 3 decades, but my focus as a process facilitator is not diving deeply into mindset and belief systems. That really is the heart of the coaching conversation. So for all of you right now, I'd like you to think about, what is that balance in your work? Think about some of the clients that you're working with. And this could be an individual client, it could be a group coaching client, it could even be a team coaching client. But what is the balance in your conversations around action and awareness, right? How much time are you focusing on helping your clients get to the goal line versus how much time are you spending pulling on the brakes to pause, to reflect, to really think about how is your mindset or your assumptions helping or hindering you in the achievement of that goal? So I want you to sit with that just for about 30 seconds. You may even want to draw out, and I won't go to annotation to mess up the slides, but you may even want to draw out a line and have action and awareness on 2 ends of the spectrum. Where are you on that spectrum? And I'd love for you to share with us. Again, we're going to use chat quite a bit today because we've got more than 40 of you on the call. Johnny's saying awareness 75%, action 25%. I know even for myself in my evolution as a coach, and I've been coaching full time now 19 years. I've been a coach for 22 years. I actually learned coaching, added that to my toolkit as I was a leader with the UN. And why I'm so passionate about team and group coaching is because I said, yes, I'm a facilitator, but to really help activate my team, I need a greater toolkit. And we didn't really have team and group coaching in those days. When I went through my coach training at CTI, Coaches Training Institute, I kept putting up my hand saying, this is great, but I'm going back to work with my team, or I'm going back to work with the government this week. How do I take these skills and put it in the land of what I call now many? And they were like, oh, that's not coaching, that's training, that's facilitation. I'm like, no, I see that there's something really different. And it really is, I think at a very simplistic level, a lot about the awareness. Notice these perspectives. I'm not going to go through, all of the comments here, but we've got, a range of many of you taking, or saying awareness 75%, 70%, 60 to 70%, 70% action, 20, 30, upwards of 50. So there's no right answer here, but I think this is a very interesting question, especially for those of us that have been coaching for a while, to really think about where am I spending time in all of these 4-box matrices. We look at this in our programming at Potentials Realized with Group Coaching Essentials. And there are tools, there are actual coaching tools under each one of these buckets. I'll touch on a few, but by no means is it going to be comprehensive at the 90 minutes we have today. Finally, I've mentioned it a few times, but I just want to really assert that accountability still plays a key role, right? If we look at the new coaching competencies and the new team coaching competencies, it's not just a one-off conversation. We're constantly circling back. And with that in mind, best practice, we are seeing a range of what group coaching can look like. The historical 1 month, 3-month model of weekly or bi-weekly meetings still holds true. Again, I was fascinated more than a decade ago to starting to explore, like, how long do group coaching conversations last? How long are the actual sessions, and how many sessions should group coaches be aiming towards? Well, there's no one specific number, but we do see a lot of coaches using anywhere from sort of a 5 to 7 touch point model. If you're meeting weekly, that might mean, you do a month or 5 weeks. If you're meeting bi-weekly, usually a 3-month or a 90-day program will have 7 touch points. And while everyone has their own preference, I think initially the sweet spot for group coaching conversations with a group of 4 to 8 people is roughly that 60 to 90-minute time frame. Personally, I've always been an advocate for 75-minute group coaching calls because it gives people enough time to come into the room, for us to check in, and that's the accountability piece, and then dive into whatever our focus is. And again, our focus is co-created, right? I am not there as a workshop leader saying, today we're going to look at this. As a group coach, I'm there to co-create with the group what we are looking at. And we can get into some of these tools, what they look like, sound like, a little bit later in the presentation. For now, I want to take a high level, but just notice that this is not something you own as the group coach. This is a partnership. We use that terminology all the time in coaching, but it's a partnership where your group members are going to really help you set the roadmap for where you go. So let's keep going. I hope this is useful. And actually, before we leave here, I think everyone can see annotate, right? So annotation, if you're not familiar with it, it's at the top of your screen. It'll say you're at the midpoint in the middle of the top of your screen. If you hover your mouse, you're viewing Jennifer Britton's screen. I'd like you to click on that with your mouse, and then you're going to see a next drop down. It will say view options and then annotate as you click on view options. So hover at the midpoint, you're viewing Jennifer Britton's screen. Then you will see view options, click on view options, and then click on annotate. And as you click on annotate, I'll just get a thumbs up, like, can you see annotate, Rachel? Hopefully I'm not taking, okay. You will see something called stamp. It's usually 3 or 4 or 5 in from the left-hand side, but I'd like everyone to stamp what is the one area that you as a coach would like to put more attention around. If there was something that would move the needle on your work as a coach this next few months, what would that be? Where do you want to spend more time? Again, there's no right answer, but as we know, heightening awareness creates new learning. And I think for all of us, regardless of how long we've been coaching, there's always a next growth edge. I, in fact, as a mentor, coach, and coaching supervisor, really like to encourage people to think about a quarterly development plan, right? Even if we don't have to renew, it's not a renewal year, but like pick a different skill area every quarter or even every month that you can be looking at. and building muscles around. So notice this, I think it's interesting, and this may be some information for the chapter, the community of practice, to say maybe we do a call at a later date around how do we enhance awareness? What are the tools and practices we use as coaches in boosting awareness? Noticing personally awareness, accountability, less around action, a little less around goal setting. And I think that's part of the pendulum, right? Like what I've seen in our profession over the last 2+ decades is there's a lot of swings that happen, right? We move like from a very goal centric time, which was probably the start of the pandemic, right? Certainly, this is what I see and have seen with my clients. And now we're slowing it down and really wanting to look at how do we get grounded? How do we become more mindful? How do we renew and ensure that people are at their peak? So thank you for doing that. Again, just from like a pull back the curtain, I always like to say that one thing that's important is we bring people's voices in. And bringing people's voices in aren't always just verbally, right? Yes, many of our clients come to coaching, they love to talk it out. And there is also a big subset of people who are more comfortable in communicating in different ways, whether that's chat, whether that's annotate. So you want to strike the balance, and you really want to look with each group what is most important for them. So Rachel and others, I'll invite you to just take a screenshot if that's useful, just so you know sort of where people are at before I clear the slide. Now, we had a question earlier, maybe just while Rachel's doing that and others may be doing that. I think there was a question earlier around the competencies. And so many of you may be aware that ICF embarked on a 2 to 3, really, it was a 2-year process of defining the team coaching competencies. As I mentioned, I was part of that process along with many, many other coaches. We kicked that process off in March of 2020. It was actually, we were supposed to meet the week that the pandemic really started. And that meeting was canceled and it quickly moved to a virtual format. What has been interesting is that, what came out of the months of dialogue, of job analysis, is that the skills and competencies of the team coach are still grounded in the baseline of our core coaching competencies. There are, of course, new skills on top of that, and we'll be looking at many of these. But, coaching is coaching is coaching. So I just really want to assert that. I think sometimes we want to overcomplicate it. And, my number one sort of mantra in the work of coaching many is it's about simplification, right? There is so much complexity that we're dealing with, complexity of relationships, complexity of power differentials, complexity of competing agendas and priorities, that in a group coaching or team coaching environment, we really want to look at simplification to its greater state. Now, simplification does not mean simple or simplistic, but it means that we want to really help people find that common ground, find that springboard that everyone can be bouncing off of. So with that, let's move. And I want to bring you in again, just keep noticing how I'm activating you on an individual level. We're doing less on a collective level today because with 41 people in the room, it's not like coaching a group of 4 or 8. But everything we're doing, we could use in a group coaching environment, right? Because part of establishing the coaching agreement is helping your group coaching clients understand what coaching is and what coaching is not. And so that slide that I just used, the slide that I just used a minute ago, and I went straight to chat, is something that I actually share with clients. So just to also provide just a little bit of like very practical pieces. So now the beauty of our work as coaches is we all come to this in different ways. And I like to use a lot of images to bring people into the room. Sometimes I start presentations with a slide like this, but I'm sure there's a slide here that's calling to you. And I'd like you to think about which of these images represents what it means to scale your coaching impact and reach. Grab your annotate again. And as you look at these different images, think about which of these speaks to you around who you are as a group or team coach, or even an individual coach? And I'll start at the bottom right. Like, do you like to create that splash of fireworks? Do you want to create a safe harbor like the lighthouse? Do you want to create some adventure like the kayaks, the multicolored kayaks? Or are you eager to create sort of that bridge, the bridge from where people are to where they want to be? Maybe you want to work with clients and help them navigate the maze, or create, that ever flowing abundance of the waterfall. Maybe you're all about making things visual and very practical, like the post-it notes. So there's no right answer, but notice that within our group, there's really a diversity that exists. And I've been fascinated about this. This actually takes us to that fourth bullet point of today's presentation, because there is something to be said about who we are uniquely and naturally as coaches. I've had the privilege of training thousands of group and team coaches since 2006. When I launched Group Coaching Essentials in January of 2006, it was actually in response to a small subset of coaches who looked at what I was doing back then, who said, wow, I want to learn more. I want to learn more about this thing called group coaching. I want to be doing what you're doing. And I think that's the roots of a very successful program, right? You listen to what people want and design around that. So every month now, sometimes 2 or 3 times a month, myself and my team run Group Coaching Essentials. About 18 months ago, I hired 3 team members. We now have a team lead for team coaching. That's Kathy Vaughn. She's based out of Nairobi in Africa. We have a team lead for group coaching, Ivana Valet, who's normally based out of Italy. She's actually, though, Canadian and from this community that I'm in today. And I got to meet with her for the first time in ever, like in real life. We could touch each other. We've known each other for a few years now, and she's been working as part of the team for the last 18 months. And Ivana is based out of Italy. She does some really amazing work. And what I love about our team is we are all different strengths, all different superpowers. Our third team member is Rita Vivat. She is actually the catalytic firecracker who is very much about let's create energy. I am more like the kayaks. I love having some adventure. I also like creating the safe harbor of the lighthouse. And so this got me thinking, I've been thinking about it obviously 2 decades worth, right? But I've been fascinated as I've taken groups of coaches and teams through processes to see like, what are the different natural strengths that start emerging? What happens when some coaches gravitate to things like meditation versus other coaches who love using the wheel of life? What leads people to ask certain types of questions? And so this leads us to actually a whole archetype. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but take note of the image that you picked today and be noticing how that shows up in your work. For example, if you are the lighthouse and you chose the lighthouse, what are you doing to create with your clients a walk through the spiral staircase that's inside the lighthouse that really represents looking at perspectives? If you chose the waterfall, what are the tools and practices you're using to really help people sense and notice that ongoing flow of abundance? So there are tools and practices that lie underneath each one of these. Again, I'm going to invite you, Rachel, and any others, if you want to take a screenshot of this, please do. I'm really fascinated because here's the framework, and I just want to share this with you. I'm going to clear this and move us to another slide in a moment. But in the work that I'm doing, and this is now turning into a body of research, we are seeing that there are archetypes of coaches. So this is part of the work that I am evolving right now. It's a proprietary model, but I want to share it with you because I think there's some real value in getting you to think about this in terms of who you are and where you naturally gravitate to. So there's 5 different types of coaches that I've really been seeing, and many of you have indicated this. So the spiral lighthouse coach, the light blue, is the type of coach that does and brings a strength in working around perspectives, right? Helping clients ascertain perspectives. They also are the coaches that create that safe harbor of the trust, safety, and connection that we know, which is really critical. Critical, especially in the post-pandemic era of people really feeling a lot of uncertainty. If we take, geopolitical and economic events on top of that, I think activating and being able to activate some of our own internal spiral lighthouse energy of creating the safety is critical. Because I think in some professions, in some industries, in some roles, and again, this is not just for group coaches, it could be for team coaches, but we have people who are coming to coaching and very hesitant to lean into the conversation. um, you know, Trust, safety, connection is critical for the work that we do. And in fact, my first TED talk really dives deeply into this notion. It's called the virtual remote hybrid checklist. But we've really seen that in order to really affect anything in the evolving workspace, we need these three elements: trust, safety, and connection. So the Spiral Lighthouse coach is really good at holding that space. And if in your work you're noticing that you're a little shaky on this is where partnering, co-coaching comes into play. And many of you are probably aware that one of the distinctions with team coaching, a best practice for team coaching now is make sure that you are co-coaching so that you can bring to that group and the larger entity skills that may not be your natural. Because we can have one or more, we might have two or three evolved skills. Like personally, I'm a creative tool master. I'm that purple person who loves to have the palette, right? Anything you read from me, because I'm a practitioner, I'm still a practitioner. I don't want to just talk to groups. I want to work with teams. I want to work with groups. I'm working with a group right now. We kicked off about a month ago, and it's a fascinating group. It's a diversity, equity, and inclusion group that is global. And they're really looking at how do they also learn to straddle 4 different continents, right? And that's been a big part of my world of work for my entire career over the last 3 decades. But I feel that what I am able to bring to this group is that palette of different tools, right? We have people in North America that are very much like, let's go for it, let's drive. We have some of our European participants that are much more reflective and stepping back. We have people in Asia that, yes, very much it's about the reflective pause. So be thinking about what you have at your disposal. And if you can quickly think of 5 to 10 coaching tools off the top of your head, even without doing this quiz, chances are you're a creative tool master. That's how you see the world. In your coach training, you can really think about all the different tools that you have evolved. Now, one of the skills that is underdeveloped for me that I've been working on a lot over these last few years is the skills that are embodied and enshrined by the grounded labyrinth coach. Maybe some of you are mindfulness coaches, wellness coaches. I think very much in today's workspace, there's an appreciation and a yearning for more of these skills and tools that will help people get grounded, help people create focus in an uncertain, complex environment. And so on our team, this is Ivana Valet. If you ever go to our YouTube channel, you'll meet Ivana. And Ivana her primary strength is as a grounded labyrinth coach. She's really great at helping groups and teams get grounded in the moment through mindfulness practices. And you can tell for me, like I am high speed, right? I'm like, that is great. But in a team, I need the counterpoint. I often will partner with someone who is a grounded labyrinth. So we can bring the speed, but we can also bring the brakes. So I hope that's useful in thinking about it, because the range that's needed in group and team coaching is more than in a one-on-one, because you now have multiple people in your room. And when I say room, it could be virtual, it could be physical, but everyone needs something different as a client. And so as a group coach, our challenge is how do we build out some or all of these? As a team coach, hopefully we're leaning in and finding coaching partners to work with. Whole other conversation, might be something that you look at a later date in terms of co-coaching. I'll just quickly go on through these because I do want to get to our best practices. And we're just about at the midpoint. So we'll probably take some questions in a few minutes, I'm thinking, Rachel, maybe mix it up. But if you have questions, maybe what you can do is put in chat while I'm just wrapping this piece up. Put in chat, queue for question, and then give us your question. That way Rachel can track it. I'll just share a little bit more about the last two of the 5 styles or superpowers. The next one is the ecosystem connector. And actually, in the research that we've been doing here at Potentials Realized now for 18 months, we are seeing that the smallest percentage of coaches have an affinity for or identify with the ecosystem connector. The ecosystem connector coach is really the systems coach, right? They are the ones that see the world through connectivity, through systems. And as team coaches, this is a really, really important skill set to bring. Even as a group coach, helping people think beyond themselves into that collective is the heart of the work. And so while we could dive a little bit more deeply, right, think about the tools that we all have, right, at our disposal. Certainly as a group coach, one of the simple but powerful questions we want to be asking in a first call is, after people have done introductions individually, ask the group the question, what are you noticing about the common threads or the common connections across this group? Get the group from call number 1 or coaching conversation 1 to think about what is their common web. What is the thing that is drawing them together? You might see something, but they might see something different. And this is part of also group coaching, right? It's about coaching in general. It's about being unattached to our own stuff as coach. In a coaching group, always be listening for what the group is asking and yearning for. So ecosystem connector is the econ. And then the red one, which I haven't touched on directly, but I said a little bit about it, that is the catalytic firecracker. Those are the coaches and professionals who are all about creating some pizzing or zazz. And when I say zazz, it's like the firecracker, right? It's probably going to capture your attention. Sometimes that it might be the provocateur, right? And some coaches on the line might be the provocateur. You're about creating a moment of like, wow, oh, that really helped me see things in a different way. So I'd love for you to share with us in chat before we go to some questions, like, what do you think is your natural come from, right? If you were to sort of think about what you lead from, which of these 5? Share with us. And again, I'll go through them. Spiral Lighthouse, creating that trust, safety, and connection. The C Fire catalytic firecracker is the person who is the provocateur. The creative toolmaster has lots of things in their back pocket. G Lab is the grounded labyrinth. They're the mindfulness type of coach that creates amazing grounding and pause. And the econ is the ecosystem connector. And they are really the systems coach. So just give us, I guess it doesn't have to be right. You can scan the QR code later, etc. We're going to go to questions. So we've got a lot of G Labs, which is great. Grounded Labyrinth, Creative Tool Masters, Mindfulness. All right. And again, you can have multiple, it's not just a one. I can only have one superpower. You might have multiple, like we see with some of our colleagues here. Creative Tool Masters, Ecosystem Connectors, Spiral Lighthouse, and Grounded Labyrinths. This last year, I've launched a program, and it's part of our 10 series pathway to the ACTC. It's called Activate Your Group and Team Coaching Superpowers. And I've been having a lot of fun. It's a 14 CCE program, and it gets coaches looking at their primary, secondary, tertiary. We look deeply at what are the tools and practices underneath each of these. And if you're ever partnering, it also helps us with that. So we are officially at midpoint. We haven't gone into any specific examples. We're going to be going into that, but let's go to some questions. So Rachel, I'm sort of looking, what are the questions and comments that have been coming up that we want to look at?
Okay, so Jennifer, we'll start from the first question that came up. So Nikhil had asked, what coaching themes or topics lend themselves to group coaching?
Yeah. Well, we're going to look at a couple of case studies, but I think there's some very common elements, right? Things like working with vision, working with strengths with our clients. We're going to look today at two different case studies working with new leaders. I sort of like foreshadowed that. Maybe you work with entrepreneurs, though. And so, whether you're working with new leaders or entrepreneurs, I've run programs for years around work-life issues. You know, when I came into coaching back in 2004, well, 2002, I started training as a coach and really had no work-life balance. Like I love work, right? It is always, it's part of my DNA and who I am. But a lot of my early work was around working with work-life issues. And then, you know, just like the evolution of a coach, you may sort of leave that. But for years, I ran a program called the 90-Day Your Balance Life Program. And people who would come to that, and it was also a retreat for people that wanted it more in that retreat workshop format, same sort of stuff, but they didn't have the ongoing accountability. And we'd look at things like vision, values, belief systems, enablers and derailers, which, if I think about the work that I do with leaders and also entrepreneurs, it often comes back to those sort of core areas. One thing you may want to build into a first coaching conversation with the group, or even pre-calls with your group members, is asking them, what are the top 2 to 3 things you want to be exploring in our coaching work? And that question then trickles up, what are the themes? And so you could be doing, I'm just going to, instead of sharing, stop share very quickly. I'm not going to go into like all the ins and outs, but you could be bringing up a whiteboard, right? And you could just be doing a whiteboard. I'm not actually going to do it right now. Or you could just be going, instead of sharing screen, you could just share a blank whiteboard screen. And so in your first conversation, the question would be, and we can sort of illustrate this right now if you want to play along. The question as a coach to the group is, what is a theme or focus area you want out of our coaching work together? So what is a theme or a focus area you want out of our coaching group or coaching work together? What I'll ask people to do is actually spotlight or highlight a part of the screen so that we know that, you know, Jennifer is going to be typing down here. Sunil is going to be typing up here. Who else can I see? We've got Sridhar is going to be typing there, because what will happen is everyone is typing in different spaces. So we've got 38 people still on the line. Let's illustrate this. I'd like you to think about, if we were a coaching group working together, what is one theme area you would like to explore during our 6 coaching conversations? So that's the question. What is one theme area you would like to explore? Let's do the best practice of using the arrow, which you're going to find 5 in from the left on your annotate. Okay, so you'll see an arrow there. Yep, someone's found it. Notice that it flicks away once other people go, but it sort of gives people an idea of where people are aiming for. And then you're going to go to your text function and put your mouse on the screen. And once you get the dash lines, you can start typing in your words. So again, the question is, what is one thing you want us to be focusing on, or one theme area you want us to be exploring in our coaching work? So grab your space, hit text, you'll get the dashed lines, type it in, and then hit enter. So I can see we've got deep work, we've got vision, we've got, I want to learn to create awareness, want to create clarity. What else? Share with us, and make sure that once you've typed it, hit your mouse outside of the dashed lines, and that's going to give us whatever you have. So we've got lots. And again, just notice that we're a group of 41 or 38. So a group of like 4, 6, 8, even 10 people will have like a lot more affinity. But we've got things like, we want to create psychological safety. We want to look at key competencies. We want to look at goal setting, deep work, presence. So this sort of harvesting leads us then to a discussion. a 5 to 10 minute discussion. And what I might do on the same whiteboard or on a different whiteboard, probably a different whiteboard today, but I would actually start to line out what we are looking at in our time together. So I would draw a line and we would start actually plopping in, grouping and plopping in what are the core areas. So if we were a group, we might have a week on dynamics and competencies. We might have a whole other area on things like collaboration. There seems to be something about us, who we are, and presence. So it's a conversation, right? It's not oh, we're going to like put this here, put that there. It's a dialogue across the group. So just give us a thumbs up if that's something you think you might try, right? It could feel a little scary, but like if this is a process that you might incorporate, again, it would be in your first call, working with the group. This is one way to start co-creating your coaching roadmap, which is falling under the competency of creating awareness. Okay, good. So Rachel, do you think that sort of answers that question?
Yeah, I think we should ask Nikhil because that was his question.
Nihil,
So
okay. Nihil, do you want to unmute? Does that give you more or enough?
No, that's very interesting. Yeah, use the
Yep.
whiteboard, get to ask, make that a starting, a start to the entire group coaching conversation. So you get the common theme or common goals that's always been my understanding of group coaching. As different from team. So that's a wonderful way to start.
Yeah, and again, I think this is one of those distinguishing factors between capital C coaching and workshops and retreats, right? As a coach, we need to make sure that this is owned by the group. So if we don't want to use the whiteboard, an alternative to that is going around the room and asking each person to share one or more focus areas. And then maybe on a whiteboard, right? Like physical whiteboard or virtual whiteboard, you're capturing those ideas and then coming up with a roadmap. The group can come up with a roadmap. You could use Post-it notes if you're physically together, or you could use virtual. Keep it simple. Once again, like let's not overcomplicate things, but I think people want to see visually what is common across the group. That can be very powerful. And that may also help with retention as well, remembering, because there's an interesting dance that happens in group coaching of like what I'm tracking individually, but then what am I also tracking collectively? So the more things we can make things visual, as you've seen by my heavy preference for visual learning in this presentation today, that there's a lot of different ways we can anchor it. Sailesh is saying there are boards like Klaxoon where we can group the ideas and get the audience to dot vote. Absolutely. So, make it as complex or make it as easy as you would like. There's lots of different ways. All right, let's go to another question, Rachel.
yeah, so Jennifer Shailesh had another question which was very kind of related. So I want to check in with you, Shailesh, if this is answered. You had a question of how do we handle different goals for the participants in the group coaching. Is that answered, or do you?
Yes, it is, but it kind of pertains to an earlier question I had. Does this work for the B2C market? For example, when you're working within an enterprise or a corporate world, they give us a group of people and they will have some common goals, some different goals, and you work with them. But imagine I want to target IT professionals with 15 years experience through LinkedIn, and they're struggling with maybe work-life balance, presence, promotions, etc., etc. Can this group coaching model work with them? Because one-on-one coaching is sometimes expensive, and this may be a good way for us to get the B2C market. I just wanted to ask you.
Yeah, so I love the way you're sort of framing it. Yes, we can take it into organizations, right? That I would say in my work, that's maybe been 30% of the work. A lot of my programming has been more with the public, right? So, hey, I want to bring together IT professionals, 15 years of experience, and our focus is going to be on work life. Or I want to work with startups, and the startup, it's about helping you clarify your vision, develop a roadmap or a plan for your business. So yes, we can go out and create public programs, however the vehicle is, whether you're doing that through LinkedIn whether you're doing it through speaking, whether, you know, you build that referral-based network, because so much of this, like coaching in general, is getting known, right? Like, how are you letting people know that this is what I do? Now, the beauty of group coaching, you can also, because group coaching really allows you, you're a generalist. You can become a real generalist of working with multiple groups. So this year I've worked with groups of educational professionals. I have a meeting after this. We're looking at textile group coaching. I shared a little bit about the group that's on the go with this global group. I work in pharma, you know, and so you can have that ability to sort of the primary skill is you're bringing people together for a collaborative conversation, whether you're going out into the marketplace and saying, hey, I'm creating a group. Are you interested in joining us? Or whether you're going into organizations or associations that bring the group to you. So in a few minutes, we're going to look at the 12 best practices, whether you're doing work within public entities or whether you are, you know, going in and doing corporate. So everything, it's you know, again, it's not all the same, but it's common enough that you will be able to use similar approaches.
Thank you
Silly?
very much.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, Rachel, that's come up?
So there's one question there that says, Ajit wants to know, are there any prerequisites for group coaching? Like, at what state should the group be? Like, should they be working together for maybe like 6 months or something?
Yeah, well, it's common that your groups don't even know each other. So many times as a group coach, and I just want to share a little bit of a visual because I think this will be useful. You know, in a group coaching situation, you're often the hub, right? You become the hub where you're bringing people together, especially if they don't know each other. And so a few minutes ago, I shared this notion of doing a pre-call. One of the best practices that we found, you know, which has really become the way to group coach, is spending time, can be 15 minutes, 20 minutes before you kick off your group coaching, meeting individually with each person. And typically what I'll ask in that pre-call, as I call it, is 3 questions. You know, who are you? What's brought you to this? So for people who are going out and doing public programming or the B2C, you know, what's brought you to this program and what are your goals for the coaching process? I think it's really important to ask that question. What are your goals? Because people sometimes are like, oh yeah, I'm coming because I want to do X. You have other people that are like, what? I need to think about my goals. I thought I'm coming to a workshop. Red flag or redesign, right? Like, people sometimes hear coaching and expect that you're going to be doing a lot of content. You're going to be training them. As marketplaces evolve, and I know Rachel was sharing with me that in many communities that you're probably in right now, there is a greater knowledge of what coaching is and what coaching is not. Certainly from 5 years ago when I came to speak to this chapter. But, you know, we do want to check that people are ready to come and be actively engaged in a coaching relationship versus, you know, coming just to learn and be that more passive learner. So the pre-call is really important in looking at sort of coaching readiness. And what you're going to start to hear is the diversity of themes that exist. So sometimes it's, you know, again, there's no one right way to do this. Sometimes you have groups and they are very diverse. This educational group that I worked with earlier this year, 5 different people, they had 5 different roles. Everything from, you know, the leader of the cafeteria system of a school board to curriculum designers to early childhood educators. That's a pretty broad range. And people were working on different things. How we structured it, I think we had 8 or 9 calls. I asked people to bring every week, we had 60 minutes for the 5 people. I asked every week people to bring their greatest opportunity or challenge that they wanted to look at. And so unlike this more thematic approach that we've been talking about for the last few minutes, you could also have a sort of a more hot seat, as some coaches call it, hot seat coaching environment, where you're doing laser coaching of each group member if the group size is small enough and if you have enough time. So literally, I would have about 10 minutes with each person. They'd share their opportunity or challenge. They would also, it wasn't just me coaching them. I might ask them a question, but then you'd also have the other group members asking them questions. And so it was really building that peer capability. Remember, I said group coaching can be a vehicle for change, connection, capacity development, and culture change. And this educational work did all four, right? It really built skills. So we had to do some work in the group around listening, asking good questions as part of this so that people weren't advising, right? Really, we wanted peers to also become better peer coaches in asking questions. So there can be that layer or not in this work as well. Again, I don't want to overcomplicate, but there's many different ways we can be coaching. So back to the original question, like at what stage is group coaching good? You might actually have groups that are forming and disbanding during your work together because geographically, maybe they're in different locations. There doesn't necessarily need to be, unlike team coaching, right? So in team coaching, we want to look for team readiness, but in group coaching, you don't really need to look at readiness of the collective. You just need to look at readiness of the individual. Does that make sense? And let's go to whoever asked this question because it's a really good question. Who asked that question, Rachel?
I think that was from Ajit.
Okay, Ajit, is that a good answer? Any follow-up on that you have? I'll take it as no.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Anything else, Rachel, before we go into the 12 best practices?
We do have one more question. In general, organizational teams might have more than 8 people. What common challenges does one encounter in their coaching?
Yes. So great question again. In an organizational setting, you may be not just even asked, but told you're going to have 15 people in your group. So ICF allows you to go to 15 to include this work on your coaching log. Okay. So as you do your coaching log, what you're tracking is every hour of context or connection with a group is 1 hour. Whether there's 3 people in the group or 15 people in the group, that's 1 hour of contact time. And if it goes beyond 15, then that's where co-coaching actually comes in. One of the clarification points that evolved with the team coaching competencies is there is provision to bring in another coach as a co-coach. And so one of the reasons why I launched the Amplify work with the superpowers a year ago is because I've been fascinated with this notion as well of co-coaching. And so understanding your superpowers is another vehicle into understanding what is the range that you bring, because really all 5 of the superpowers should be present. And that's a strong should, but chances are when you're coaching many groups or teams, especially larger systems, they're going to need all of those because someone in the group will need all of those. So we're actually launching a co-coaching essentials program. I'm launching it next week to help coaches really understand, now that they understand their style and their superpowers, how and what should they be looking at with their co-coach. So I hope that answers it. I don't know. I think I went on a bit of a tangent. Did I answer that, Rachel? Do you think? The 15 people. Yeah, like 15, it's likely, but I think with experience, you will be able to say, you know what, we can go with larger groups, but there's going to be less trust, safety, and connection, right? And I think a lot of people are becoming very attuned to the need, the importance of psychological safety. If that does not exist, we can't change that. Like that's a core element required for coaching conversations, and it is influenced by numbers. So if you do wind up though with larger groups, this is where peer partners can be another strategy to really help people build pockets of deeper levels of trust and connection with others in the group. And you may keep those groups sort of rotational with the same grouping. All right. Okay. And yeah, we've seen some other really good examples. Have you used personality tools like DISC? Yes. I have a meeting in an hour with an organization that wants me to come in. I've been an everything DISC partner for 12, 13 years. I really enjoy it because it provides a common language and framework for groups and teams. So I use it with teams, but I also sometimes am asked to come in and use it with groups. The Enneagram, absolutely. I don't use the Enneagram, but I know organizations that do. And for anyone who's interested, you can elaborate on audio if you like. Excellent. One that we evolved, and you'll see this if you listen to my second TED Talk, Coaching Teams Through Chaos. 3 years ago, I evolved a framework. It's called the Coaching Hybrid Work Styles. And we've had tens of thousands of people take that assessment. It's a separate quiz. Many teams that I coach use it. And I'm not going to go into the details, but it also helps team members understand a bit more about who they are. And so why I evolved that is because because of budget, right? So many of these assessments cost a lot of money. And we were finding in the switch to hybrid workspaces, which is the whole reconnecting workspaces body of work that I have been evolving, people were struggling. Like, how do I communicate what my work preferences are? And that's still an issue. It's really like all of this has become magnified in the hybrid working space. I'm also really pleased to see in our chat, we've got Clifton StrengthsFinder. I love StrengthsFinder. Teams that I work with love StrengthsFinder, or Clifton Strengths as it's now known, because it's really easy. It's understandable. It's robust. As an alternative, if they don't have money for Clifton StrengthsFinder, we'll use VIA, which many of you might be familiar with. And that is from the positive psychology movement. So I know we've got one hand up. Let's take that, and then we're going to dive into the 12 best practices. Okay.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
Thanks for your answers. Could you give me a rough range of costs for these tools when you use them for group coaching? Just a range, minimum, maximum.
Yeah. Well, again, this is where there's a geographical difference. I know Canadian pricing is different than US pricing. It'll be different from you. I would suggest, and I'll just go like not numbers, but low tier to high tier, right? Your lower end, no cost, are things like VIA Strengths. There's no cost to that, which is lovely. Then you go Clifton StrengthsFinder. Here in Canada, it's about $25 per person. Then we would go to the next tier, which is really your DISC. Here in Canada, that's like $80. Then you might go, if you're working with a team, into something like 5 behaviors. That's about $150. Or you could go with a team diagnostics from Team Coaching International. That's also like $150 to $200 per person. And that cost adds up. Smaller organizations, it's like, we don't have budget. So again, you're going to want to really be like, budget has always been a big issue for my clients, which is why I've evolved so much of my work and then shared it with the wider world through publication, through writing, through some of these other tools that we're creating. Because I think in economic challenging times like we are in now, like we were in 2008, right? As in 2008, I was a young coach. It was 4th year of this business. And the last economic drop, I was seeing a lot of amazing coaches just leave. They went bankrupt because all they had at their disposal were these high-end tools. And yes, in all times, you'll always have people who can afford the high-end tools. But in times of economic disruption, people are going to say, I've got to choose from A or B. What am I going to do? So I always like to be able to give my clients a range. It's their choice. It's their program. So I hope that's useful. And I hope it's useful in moments like this. Like, I think one of the reasons why group coaching is so important right now is because of the economic climate. Organizations are looking at how do we get more people involved? And I'm going to use that as the springboard. So why is it important? Right? It's important because it really provides support for implementation, whether we're going into an organization or we're working with, say, entrepreneurs, bringing groups of entrepreneurs together. It's not just about learning, it's about getting people into action. It is also about cross-pollinating and creating that environment, which is about collaboration. What is the biggest argument right now from CEOs? I'm a CEO and I'm always the other voice, but like CEOs say, we need people in the office to collaborate. Well, we can collaborate if you can use the tools virtually, but a lot of people don't want to use the tools virtually. But group coaching is about collaboration and peer relationship. And that peer learning is so important, right? We learn best through peer relationships. So much research on this. And so that is at the heart of group coaching. It also creates a space for accountability. If I'm left for my own devices, will I get it done? Maybe if I'm highly motivated, highly driven, but we have seen changes to motivation and locus of control in the last 3 years throughout the pandemic. And so I do feel that for some people, knowing that they're going to come back to be with the group a week later, 2 weeks later, creates a bit of a booster for them around accountability. And we also continue to hear, and all of these showed up in the research I did back in 2008 and 9, and are being validated again. But really, group coaching creates that pause, that space for reflection, so that we can gain awareness, we can take better action, and harness those insights. So feel free, right? These are buried in chapter 4 of Effective Group Coaching. You'll also see many of these referenced in From One to Many. But these are in 2023, why we really want to advocate for group coaching at this moment. For us here at Potentials Realize, we have been a business that has been virtual and remote first. I was always a remote leader back in the 1990s when we were doing this by long range radio. To me, our work is all about the conversation and creating a ripple effect. And as I look back at what we as an organization have done now in the last 19 years, having the privilege of training tens of thousands of coaches, that's a big impact. To see the discourse, and I'm hearing it today, it's very satisfying because, like my vision back in 2002, when I was first asked, who are you as a future self? It was this woman named Fire that wanted to create a ripple effect. You can see our logo, right? It's the water drop. And even going through hours like this today with you, I know that you're going to take something forward and ripple it forward. We're also really wanting to create more fun and impact in work, right? It's been a tough few years. And so how do we bring some of that zest back in an environment that's complex and also very serious? I have lived and worked on the edge of post-disaster all my life. And even back then, my stance was, as a leader and a facilitator, we need to have fun. It is not to be Pollyannish, saying that the world is perfect, but if we're not having fun, if we are not renewing ourselves, then we're not going to be able to serve others, really. And I still believe that 2 decades later. So I want to share just 2 quick case studies. I know Rachel actually has been doing some work, but when I first got asked by organizations to do work and bring group coaching in, it was often with new leaders. And so you've heard a lot about my work. Rachel, I don't know if you would be okay to share just maybe a minute or 2 about some of the work that you've been doing as a group coach with leaders.
Yeah, so I think I've most of my group coaching has been with the organization, so I've not done B2C yet. With new leaders, I've done work with new leaders, people just stepping into first-time leader roles and, helping them navigate that space. I've done work with leaders where there's a big organizational change happening and everybody's trying to, find their space with the new changes that are happening. I've done some work also with the women leaders in organizations. So that's been another space where, helping women leaders find their voice and be more assertive and, create their own, leadership brand. So that's another space that, I've done work with leaders. And I think the thing that has, if I were to, think about all the groups I've done over the years with leaders, the thing that stands out for me is, I think the piece that starts connecting them at some point is this thing that, we're all human. We all have challenges. We're not the only ones who don't know what this fear, this self-doubt, this discomfort is about. And I think it gives people that space to voice it out, to own it, to learn from each other, to hold each other's hand. And I think it also creates a support system for people that I often see lasts way beyond the coaching that we do. So yeah, so that's been my experience of coaching leaders in organizations.
And I would say that everything Rachel has just mentioned holds true for that B2C public programming as well, right? I think if you really are specific, like there are people who will pay out of their own pocket and be like, yeah, I want to be the best leader, female leader especially. And so you might have people from across organizations. And it is amazing to see how those groups really become, you know, the longevity of the group can extend beyond your work together. And sometimes it ends, but people really are impacted. So thank you so much for that, Rachel. And I know we've got Sridhar. Sridhar, do you want to unmute and talk a little bit again, maybe an alternative? What are you doing as a group coach?
Thanks, Jennifer. So when I reflect on the group coaching work I've done, some of the themes that have emerged have been trust within organizations, within a group of leaders, influencing stakeholders. It has been about decision making, and there have been themes around grooming new managers, first-time managers. So these are some of the themes that have emerged. The interesting part, I think, has been when people get to see the person beyond the role, behind the role, something magical happens. And that's fascinating. How within a span of a few hours, people shift. You see them actually shift in the chairs. You see them move around, move to the other tables. The conversations become softer, more mellower, much more personal. Vulnerability is okay. A lot of judgment is dropped. And like you rightly said, we're co-creating. We're not really there to teach them anything or to direct them, but we're just holding that space together for them, and the magic happens between the people in the room or in the session. So those are some experiences, and I can't thank you enough for everything that you've taught me. It's been fascinating. And there've been times when I've over-designed, and I've seen that whatever I had designed had no meaning for the people in the room, and something magical came out of the conversations that they were having. And I remember this particular point you had made: don't over-design. And I came back and looked at my notes, and there it was. Point number 2, don't over-design.
Don't over-design. And Sridhar, you did the essentials with us and the practicum, right?
Yes.
So you've done a couple of courses getting that foundation. And in a minute, I'm going to go to these best practices. And I think we always, as coaches, want to create value, like give value. So I've got to bring this. And just as Sridhar said, right, it's like we need to self-manage and be able to put that aside, because really people just want to be heard. They want to explore their areas. They want to connect with others, and that takes time. Well, thank you very much for those 2 examples. I want to share a third example, again, of I think it's coming up. Yeah, business owners, right? I've done a lot of work over the years with business owners, and that stemmed early on from work I did throughout the Caribbean. So again, in addition to doing post-disaster management, which in those days was mostly post-hurricane, post-volcanic eruption, I also worked with micro enterprise, what in the Caribbean is called cottage scale industry. There's a lot of ecotourism throughout Central and South America, the Caribbean, which is where I worked throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. And I've had this passion about how do we create economic sustainability all my life. I really see group coaching as being an important vehicle for bringing people who have micro enterprise, small businesses like ourselves, together to share best practices. So I've been working on a project, a writing project. This comes from a unpublished work. It's still in evolution, but it's a framework that I lead. And just on a group coaching lens, typically what I do is I bring business owners together for either a 90-day period or a 1-year period. In fact, this year is year 5 of our Coaching Biz Growth Lab. And I get to work with a handful of coach business owners. Some are solopreneurs, some have large businesses. And we work through many of these areas. So that B2C example, right? You can get the niche then it's very easy to sort of take people through a shared experience. And over our year together, we look at these 9 different buckets that are critical for entrepreneurial success. Some of you may have a copy of, and I'm in the process of moving, so I don't have my bookshelf. I will not have my bookshelves anymore. But in 2018, I wrote a book. It's a workbook planner called Coaching Business Builder, which was also published as Plan, Do, Track for virtual remote employees. And in CBB, or Coaching Business Builder, these are the 9 core skills that are integrated. And, you know, whether we aspire to grow a multi-million-dollar business, as I have done over the years, or we want to keep it small and powerful, these are the skills that we need to work through at any time. And so this is an interesting process, right? Even though there's sort of these 9 core pillars, or the 9 box, they become sort of the foundation that we coach around. So in addition to group coaching conversations, there's also some training, and you may have a bit of a hybrid, right? A hybrid of some training and coaching, but just make sure that you're differentiating when is a content heavy session where I might do something around marketing or productivity or your DNA as a business owner, which then we have a subsequent coaching conversation around. So as you can hear, I could talk for hours. I love this work. I think it's really important on all 4 of these areas. I want to get to the 12 best practices, which are just behind this, but I think we've given some really good examples that group coaching is a vehicle for capacity development. We've talked about peer coaching. Another element you'll want to think about is how do you help people build coaching skills? Because if you are in a group, it's not just about the coach coaching, it's about each other coaching each other. So we need to build that capacity. Connection, you've heard that come up time and time again. It's a core area. It's really what people are yearning for right now in the world. And it's a vehicle for change, right? We know that, you know, solutions, best solutions are created collaboratively. It's not about, you know, locking ourselves in a room with our own head. It's about what gets stimulated when we come together. I have to say, like on a personal level, in moving, you know, I'm now an empty nester. My son is going off to university. He left for his summer job 2 weeks ago. I'm on my own, and you know, after raising a wonderful child, it's like that's a process of change. And I've been very reflective this year of like, wow, so much of what we do as coaches helps us on a personal level, because this is big changes. I've transitioned my son. I've transitioned my parents. I was a caretaker for my 2 parents who are 86 and 88. I was their primary caretaker throughout the pandemic with everything else on the go. And then we've moved. We've sold our big house, and I'm living with a smaller environmental footprint, right? I'm an environmentalist by training, and having a big 3,000 foot square home is great, but not great when it's only one person. So now I live in a little condo by the lake and having a lighter footprint, but it's all about change. And I think it's in these transition moments. People say to me, like, you're going through like 5 transitions. And it's like, yeah, but you know what? Like, I feel like I have groups that support me in all these different change processes. If I tried to do it alone, I wouldn't be here today talking to you in the way that I talk. But it's about having the collaborative space as well. And all of this rolls together to create, you know, change on a culture level, whether that's an organizational cultural level or even a geographic cultural level as well. So want to just go forward, leave our presentation, because you've sort of heard these 12 best practices as we've gone throughout, whether it's been through me directly, but if there are 12 things that you want to remember, these are what are enshrined in the book From One to Many, celebrating its 10th anniversary this summer. So number 1, Sridhar just mentioned it, less is more. We fit a lot into this presentation today because I wanted to give you good value. And we know that in coaching, it's about the conversation. 2, we want to know your client. And I've just got someone coming. Hi there. I'm just wrapping up the presentation. Can you come on in? I'm just with a group for 2 more minutes. Yeah, thank you. Know your client. So understand and know who your client is. And then also remember that people learn in different ways. We've talked about that today. Finally, make sure that you meet with participants before the start of the program. That's the pre-calls. And remember that what you do happens in between your sessions. We want to build trust, safety, and connection, and keep it simple. So I think they're going to come back in 5 minutes. We need to remain flexible, have a strong focus on process, and a light touch on direction. So it's not about, just as we talked about, it's about co-creating, as that's the language we've used today, where it's about really letting the group set direction, and we're just looking at how do we keep the group moving together forward. They need to do the work, number 10, it's not about you, and make sure that you evaluate as you go. Finally, follow up as value add. And when we do a follow up as a value add, what that means is, maybe you bring the group together a month later, and that allows you to hear what people are doing and using, right? Like the impact of coaching is much longer than we often anticipate. So to wrap this up, because we will be wrapping on time, can you grab your annotate one last time and stamp for us which one you think is the one you want to focus on going forward? So as you put your work, your conversations into practice, which is the one that you want to work on going forward? All right. Again, no right one. What I will say on this, these 12 are going to be spotlighted over the next 12 months as part of our 10th anniversary celebrations. If you are on TikTok, I'm just starting a TikTok feed, and that is at Group Coach. On YouTube, we've talked about YouTube, so there'll be calls throughout the year, deeper dive into each one of these. And I just hope that you've taken away something from today. So please share with us in the last minute, what is your biggest takeaway from today's presentation? You've all indicated something of focus, and I hope that you will think about how you might use each one of these techniques in your own work. So thank you, Rachel, for having me join you tonight. It is just 9:30 here in the morning, but I know it's the end of your day there. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So, and I think I should have mentioned this to all of you, that Jennifer's on a break. She's on a vacation, but she has been gracious enough to come in just to, facilitate this session for us. So thank you so much for doing that. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom so generously with us today. I think this has been, one of the best sessions that I've attended. And for me, it's also, like I told you at the beginning, very personal, because I've learned so much from you and your books. And to have you here has been an amazing experience for me, so personally as well, and as I'm sure it has been for the group as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of everybody here in the chapter that we've really enjoyed and learned a lot in the session. And I can see a lot of those messages there in the chat as well. For the participants, I will be sending you your CCEUs in about a week's time. The recording will go up on the YouTube channel for the chapter in a few days, and I will let you know. And Jennifer, I think there's something that everybody would want to know, that assessment that you spoke about.
Yes.
Is there a way for us to access that?
Absolutely. I'm going to flip back and I'll just leave the QR code up. I'm going to put myself on mute if that's okay, while I let these folks in to look at a leak that is happening. So you can just scan the QR code in the top corner there, and that's going to take you to the quiz. So I'd love for you to see what you are. If you want more on this, again, over at the YouTube channel, one of the channels is all about the superpowers, so you can learn more. It's really been a pleasure, and I can't wait to see many of you in virtual journeys down the road. And so be well, and thank you again for having me today.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Be well. Bye, everyone. Don't forget to save chat.
Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. And we will
Thanks,
see you.
Rachel. Very well organized. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sridhar.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
Pleasure.